G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Look at that, light on in daytime. Another one, and 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 yet one more under a clear blue sky. Another one outside the bunk room door. Another one, and another one. I counted about 11 lights on. Why is it so, you wonder? Well, you see, 12.295 volts while sucking 13 amps. Through this little backup inverter that I usually keep in the car is 159.835 watts. So we write that down on the noting of the pad. This is day 6 of my desperate efforts to resuscitate these batteries, which when I got them on the 19th of the 5th, they were reading 6.05 and 6.04 volts resting voltage. So on the 20th, I connected 2 little 10-watt solar panels to them, and they received about 12 amp hours. So the next morning they were resting at 12.25 volts, and I connected the big 170-watt panel to them, and they got it 35 amp hours, I suppose. Brought them up to 46.95 as a recharge. On the 23rd, they were resting at 12.66 volts. So at the end of the day in blue, I'd put 126.5 amp hours into 225 amp hours worth of rated capacity battery after a cloudy day, followed by a sunny one. Then, starting off at 134.58 amp hours gone in, I brought them up to 164.8 amp hours. There they were holding 12.74 in the morning at 09:15. Yesterday morning they were holding 12.8. I brought them up to 178 amp hours. Total recharge. And then this morning, after admittedly 21 hours off the charge, they were only holding 12.77 volts. So I figured it's probably time to give them a load test, which commenced at 10:05. Connected them up and I was showing minus 12.5 amps, 12.61 volts, which is 157 watts. Gradually, the current went from minus 12.5 to minus 14 to minus 13.9, minus 13.9. These are on 5 minutely intervals. Minus 13.9. After 5 minutes, we're showing minus 14 amps, 12.21 volts. That line there, 12.2, comes over here and it shows us 63.7%. So we're talking 37%, 36.3%. So their voltage is down by 36%. But if I'm pulling a mere 6% of their rated capacity worth of current out of them, they really should be only about 6% down on their voltage under load. If these were new batteries, they should be able to hold 13.2 volts at rest. And when you put a 6% load on them, they should be able to hold around about 13.04 volts at minus 6 amps. And it all should be still in the green. Well, it was never that. It was down here. We went down as low as 12.17. before coming back up slowly to 12.295. About an hour and 12 minutes into the performance. We're holding 12.285 and we're holding 13 amps. But the batteries are effectively more than 33% sulfated, damaged, pre-aged, buggered up. They're not actually 225 amp hours worth of storage capacity. There's only 143 amp hours worth of storage capacity, and the storage efficiency is not going to be 95%. The storage efficiency is only going to be about 60%. So I'm going to have to put 10 amp hours in for every 6 amp hours that I pull out. Effectively, these batteries that I accepted as brand new 8 days ago, they are equally damaged as something that's had 4 years in a bloody golf cart if it was delivered new. They look great. They had their little red protective plastic covers on their positive terminals, and so did these. These ones were holding 6.3 volts each, so we're talking 12.6, 12.65 volts. So they were only half as bad. I haven't yet attempted to fully charge them on the big solar panel and then load test them. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that these are probably 15% sulfated and discharged, and their storage efficiency is only going to be about 80% instead of 95%. And that pair, instead of being 225 amp hours, is going to be around about the 165 amp hours, and that'll be another 165 amp hours. So the Century Battery Company's lackadaisical supply and logistics chain has taken at least 61 days for these batteries to go from wherever they were filled to the end point of retail sale, where I helped unload them from my son's wife's car, because she had to drive to Armidale to get the bloody things, because the dealer down there was planning on waiting until the courier had a full truckload before he was going to ship them the last 100 kilometres. I am going to wait until I've sucked 10% of the official rated capacity out of these things, and then I'll have a go at charging them up and see whether maybe perhaps the discharge and the recharge can get the reaction going to crack the sulfate off the plates. But effectively, I think I can feel a warranty claim in the pipeline coming on, because I just don't see the point in paying $1,500 for batteries that are delivered fit to be recycled. And to be honest, when one has spent 20 years living on second-hand batteries intercepted on the way to the dump, wistfully looking forward to the day when one might have the money that one can put down on the table and say, I want to buy new batteries, a whole set of new batteries, all the same age, so I can put them in a bank and I know how long they are expected to last if I look after them. You finally get to that point, you buy the batteries and they get delivered fit for scrap. The level of disappointment that I feel when looking at these batteries and playing with them, it is extreme. It really is extreme. I did start making this video when I started the load test, and I was so pissed off that I made a mess of the pause button and I had to restart the video. But this is really giving me the da-da dits, which is Morse code for the shits. And rhyming slang in Morse code. Good one, hey. Okay, so what this proves is that I'm just barely smart enough to know that I should have taken a multimeter with me when I first inspected these batteries. It means that I'm just barely smart enough to recognise the need to make a warranty claim when I can't get the batteries to accept the full charge. What does it mean for you? Well, I think it means you should take a leaf from the playbook of Greta Thunberg and the idea that 1 + 1 = 7 million. If all of you people who watch this video show it to lots of your friends and tell all of your friends about this stupid bloody scam that is operating within the lead-acid battery supply industry, operating so that batteries are routinely delivered to the end point of sale, having taken 3 weeks or so, 28 days to get from wherever they were filled with electrolyte to the end point of retail sale, so that the batteries are already 20% self-discharged, sulfated and damaged when you go to get the battery, if it's arrived at the shop that day. And then normal procedure is for the battery to stay at the retail point of end sale for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, 98% of the batteries have been sold to the customers. So if we take the midpoint as 1.5 months plus 3 weeks to get there, it means that the average battery that's being sold in Australia, if you are as far as I am from the factory, it's probably going to be like the worst of these batteries that I got. 42% discharged, sulfated and damaged. Now what can you do as a consumer? When you go to buy your $220 or $300 car battery, first buy yourself a $10 multimeter. Approach your battery supplier and say, oh, well, excuse me, I don't know whether I want to buy that battery that you're offering me, the one that's at the front of the shelf, the one that's been in your shop for the longest time. You want to sell me a battery, I want to get me multimeter, and I'm going to prong every battery you've got that will fit in my car, lead me to them, and I will take the one that has the highest resting voltage. And if every consumer was to do that, all of a sudden, the endpoint retail seller would find he's got a shelf full of batteries that are 3 months old, and the logistical supply chain will take a whole bunch of dead batteries back to the prick who filled them up at the factory, and he's going to have to empty the acid out and cut the box open and then melt the lead back down and make a new battery, and he won't have made any money out of it. And maybe, perhaps, possibly, the idea will form in what passes for the minds of the bean counters who dreamt up this stupid fucking system, that it might be a better idea if we permit the people who want to get a brand new battery at the other end of the supply chain, we'll ship the batteries dry and we'll let them be filled with electrolyte at the end point of retail sale, so the customer actually receives the new battery that they pay for. Because right at the moment, my suspicion is that 99% of Australians are too ignorant to know how outraged they should be at the scam that is being perpetrated on them every time they buy a lead acid battery that's been manufactured in Australia. I'm going to pontificate and say that if a battery won't hold 13 volts, which means that it is 90% fully charged, it's not actually worth purchasing for anything other than scrap metal prices. It's not my fault that 99% of Australians are too ignorant to know that little minor point, because I know it, and I still got stuck with these bloody things that are nearly worn out. Welcome to apathy and complacency, and she'll be right, mate, I'll just take what's available. No. Sometimes taking what's available is the wrong thing to do. Sometimes you should actually put up a bit of a fight, and I think I'm going to have to fight on this. And the worst part of it is I really won't know for about another 4 or 5 days whether these are salvageable to the point where I can sort of accept them, because I don't really want the shit fight of making a warranty claim. I would really like it if these batteries can come good, but the plan is at the moment to discharge them until they've given up 22.5 amp hours. And then switch off all the lights in the house while the inverter's still running, so I make sure I do get them all. And then connect up the big solar panel and see what this battery does when I know that it's just had 22.5 amp hours come out of it, and I stick on a solar panel that can give it 10 or 11 amps worth of current. Maybe, perhaps, possibly, charge it up, run it down, charge it up, run it down. Maybe after a couple of cycles like this, it might magically go back to being a battery that's worth having, perhaps. One might hope. Okay, 10:45. We're looking at 12.275 volts and 13 amps. So it's producing half a watt less than it was 10 minutes ago. So we start turning off lights. .1 amps, 12.32 volts. Okay, quarter of an amp, 12.43 volts. And we turn the inverter off, 12.46. Okay, so it was holding 12.275 and it's now holding 12.46 when it comes offline, which goes pretty close to my estimation that it should have been 6% less under load than at rest, and we've just discovered that it's at rest 12.4, 73%, and at 12.3 it was on 67.5%. Yeah, it's it indicates, if nothing else, my assumptions and figures are pretty right. The battery at the moment is at least 30% stuffed. But in 10 minutes time, I will stick the solar panel on and we'll see what happens. It's now reading 12.5. Quite a good little unit this. I don't often use it, but every time I have, it has worked perfectly. Okay, so there's enough light going through the panel. It's now reading 12.58 volts. So we'll stand the panel up. .7. 12.72. 10.05 amps. 12.79. 2 minutes in, which makes 128 watts. 12.05 10.3 amps, 13.05 volts for 134.4 watts. I won't be able to maintain that for very long, because shortly the shade of those leafless branches on the end of that dead wattle tree are going to impinge on the solar panel, and we'll cut back to about 50% of that amount of current, and that'll last for nearly an hour. 10 past 12. 13.125. 10.45 amps for 137.15 watts. 12.15. 13.16. 9.97 amps. What did I tell you about the tree shadow? For 131.7 watts. 07. 20 past 12. 13.115. 5.95. 78 watts. 12.30. 5.72 amps, 13.1 volts, 74.9 watts. So 4.17 amp hours in the first half hour of recharging. Okay, 1300 hours or 1 o'clock. 9.66 amps. 13.24 volts. 127.8 watts. Which means we've replaced 7.351 amp hours of the 22.5 amp hours that I sucked out through the inverter. Not only do you have to know what you're doing, you've got to want to do it anyway. You have to be that obsessive, that compulsive, that autistically, Aspergerishly interested in what's going on inside the battery, as to take 5-minute observations while discharging and charging it in order to figure out whether it's worth keeping. And of course, the people who make and sell batteries for a living are fully aware that 99.99% of the population of Australia either doesn't know, doesn't care, or isn't bloody interested, or all three, to the degree that they're going to go through this rigmarole to examine their batteries. Quite literally, they bank on our stupidity and ignorance and apathy. Yes, they do. It's really true. They bank on our stupidity. Whereas the little swamp wallaby, Wallaby bicoloratura, she banks on humanity's generosity and willingness to share and do the right thing. Changing of the guard. These two are sort of half sisters, half cousins kind of thing. 1:30. 13.38 volts. 9.75 amps. 130.2 watts. Giving a total of 12.3656 amp hours. Recharge from the 22.5 amp hours discharge. Hello, Felicity and Joey. "17 minutes past 2. I've had to move the panel to evade the shade. 13.46 volts. 6.02 of the amps, which is 81 watts. And I've replaced probably 80% of the power I took out. So the big question is, will I manage to replace the current today before the sun descends so low into the shade line of the trees that the panel doesn't make enough power to be worth sitting here and recording? That is the question. What do you think, Felicity? Is the game worth the candle? I think before I start this whole performance tomorrow, I will relocate the batteries about 2 metres in the general direction of the swamp wallaby in order to make use of all that lovely sunshine that's out there, rather than having to put up with all this cloudy stuff that's here, or shady stuff that's here. Prolonging the afternoon sun for a couple of hours is better than chasing the sun 15 minutes earlier in the morning. At least as long as you don't get clouds developing at midday. Yes, you want me to feed you, don't you? There you go. Happiness is a swamp wallaby hand-fed on bread. And they learn that in the pouch. Okay, by 2:30, I put back 19.04 amp hours, which is 84% of the 22.5 that I took out this morning. And now down to 3.5 amps. Due to the shade penalty imposed by the dead trees up sun of me. 2:45. Doe and Joey have been replaced by the alpha male. This is Felix. And 13.43. 4.03 amps. What do you think, Felix? Bread is good. Yes? If in doubt, cast your bread upon the wildlife. Isn't that right? $13.47, 3 p.m, 4.18 amps. So I've now put 20.9 amp hours back in, which is 92% of what I took out. And the voltage has started to rise. And if the battery was in perfect condition, you'd have to put at least 110% back of what you took out. So I should be trying to put 25 amp hours back in there to make up for the 22.5 amp hours I took out. I don't know whether I'm going to get there today before the sun goes down. But that's the game plan, and I will try. $3.30, 13.67 volts, 3.05 amps. So the voltage is going up as the amps are going down. That means we're getting close to being full. In fact, it's 22.674166 amp hours, which as a percentage of 22.5 is 1.007. So almost 101%. 3:45, we've put in 23.25625 amp hours, which is 103.3% of what came out. And the voltage is climbing. So it's actually looking rather good at the moment. Yeah, at 1547. .56 of an amp at 4 p.m. 13.4 volts, which gives us 23.704 amp hours. For the recharge, which is 105.3% of the current which I sucked out, 22.5 amp hours. So if the battery was in absolutely perfect tickety-boo condition, that would be your perfect discharge charge cycle. Put 105% back in. Allowing for the fact that you don't live in a perfect world, I should have been able to put another 5% back in there, another 1.5 amp hours or so. However, it'll be very interesting to see what there is to see tomorrow morning regarding the voltage of that battery over there. And I guess it's just rinse and repeat this cycle for a couple of days in a row and see if it improves, because I don't think I want to get stuck with a battery that's 30% rooted the first day that I get it, and that's what that thing's been delivered to me as. Actually, it was looking more like 42% rooted when I first got it. Welcome to the gradual slide into the Mad Max apocalypse times, when you can't actually buy new stuff in good condition. As everybody forgets how the technology works, until eventually everything stops working, I guess. 0.23 of an amp. Okay. As near enough to 5 o'clock as damn is to swearing. 0.06 of an amp. Okay, well, at 5 o'clock it was 13.05, it's now 13.04. 23.939 amp hours, which is 106.39% of the 22.5 amp hours that I took out of it. Not quite a perfect recharge, but getting close to it. If I'd been able to put 110% back in of what I took out, that would have been tickety-boo perfect. So it would. Multi-purpose things, these rubber bands. It's always good practice to insulate bare ends of wires whenever electricities is concerned. I'll lie down, bugger. There we go. Okay, approaching quarter of an hour after they come off charge. Let's see what they're going to have to say. 6.49 and 6.5, which translates as 12.99, which might almost seem impressive if it wasn't for the fact that the other two batteries over there are holding 13.17 and 13.19 volts, and the near one has had 6 amp hours during the day, and the far one has had about 7.5 amp hours during the day. So the near set, 36 amp hours divided by 225 equals, it's had 16% of its rated charge capacity as a recharge. The far set, which has had 44 amp hours divided by 225, it's had 19.5% of its rated capacity as a recharge. 13.17 volts is about here, which translates to 98%, whereas 13.19 volts, which is what they say is as near as damn is to swearing, to 13.2, it's kind of 99.3% fully charged. Whereas this first pair, batteries A and B, they've had 179.43 amp hours go into them, including today's little dive down, minus 22.5, bounce back up, plus 23.93, and yeah, freshly off the charge, 12.99 volts, which is about 91.5%. And I don't think that another 4 amp hours would have made much difference to that equation. To be quite honest and quite frank, I think the reason why they are holding as high a voltage as that when there's no load on them, despite the way they bottom fell out of their volts this morning when I hit them with a few amps, you know, like they were 33% down when they were only drawing 6% of the rated capacity worth of current. So there's sort of 5 times more current drop than you would expect, or 5 times more voltage drop than you would expect from a healthy battery. I think the reason that they are showing a spuriously high voltage today at the end of the recharge is because they are, quote, tender. Like I said, they're about the same as the best batteries that would come out of a set of 8 that have been in a golf cart for 4 years or so. So that's kind of disappointing. Although I will put them through another cycle tomorrow and probably another couple on the weekend and see if I can improve on that. But yeah, I think I got 2 really dud batteries and 4 that are not too bad. Not too bad at all, considering the 28 days it took them to get here. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Have a nice day. I'm about to go to town now. Ciao.